What's up guys, it's the Actual Justice Warrior here, and I don't know if you know it, but it's been precisely 1 year since the first video I ever uploaded to this channel was uploaded. So I wanted to start out by thanking you guys, because my goal was to get to 1,000 subscribers within a year, and I'm at around 1,300 right now, so I really appreciate you guys, and I am going to continue making videos for this channel. Might change the name though. Now rather than do some goofy celebration to mark the 1 year anniversary, I thought I would make a video specifically for you guys based on something that you asked for. A few weeks ago I did a video responding to the debate between Charlie Kirk and Cenk Uygur's nephew. In that video I embedded a poll asking you guys if you wanted me to do a response to Cenk's post-debate hit piece that he did against Ben Shapiro. Cenk Uygur debated Ben Shapiro. I didn't cover it because I think the debate was actually a pretty good match. Ben Shapiro definitely won in my opinion, but Cenk didn't descend into ad homs like he had in other debates, so it didn't seem that interesting to me to do a video on. However, a lot of people have been messaging him telling him that he got destroyed in the debate, so of course he responded in the most childish way possible by doing a hit piece against Ben Shapiro that appeared on his channel the day after the debate. But before we get into all that, I am going to address some of the criticisms that I got for making that Cenk's nephew versus Charlie Kirk video. So a lot of people thought it was totally uncool that I called Cenk's nephew throughout the entire video, but there's a good reason I did that. As a random counterpoint during the debate, Cenk's nephew brought up the fact that Jared Kushner got into college because his father went to that same college. He was basically a legacy admission. And Cenk's nephew and other regressives consistently use this as an attack against people who are against affirmative action. Now, I'm not a real big fan of legacy admissions, to be perfectly honest. However, I do know that there is some good that comes from it. The fact is, if more than one generation of person goes to the same university, that increases the chances that the family will donate to the university exponentially. Also, the bulk of legacy admissions are not actually rich people getting into the school. There are people who work at the school getting their kids into the school. So it might be a professor or a staffer trying to get their kid into a university. Now, while I don't like the idea of somebody getting something they didn't earn, I understand that there is some good that is done through legacy admission. I mean, think about it. If it's more likely to produce a donor, that means legacy admissions partially pay for the research that universities do. A lot of universities do research into medicine or better ways to grow food. People are obsessed with climate change. They also do a lot of climate change research. The money donated also goes to scholarships for underprivileged kids. So while legacy admissions may suck on their face, and I still feel like they're a little too sketchy for me, I understand that that allows the university to do a lot of things. Now, while there's all of that nuance that Cenk's nephew ignores, here's something that's not very nuanced, and it's why I call him Cenk's nephew. Is you can't really complain about legacy admissions when your uncle runs the company that you work at. The only reason this dude has an online presence is because his uncle runs the Young Turks. Period. End of sentence. So for somebody like that to harp so much on legacy admissions really shows that that bothers him. So because that bothers him, and that is hypocritical, I decided to point it out. So that's why Cenk's nephew will be referred to as Cenk's nephew. At least until he has an original thought. The next thing that actually upset a lot of people was that I went after his Instagram, which is not something I would normally do. However, like the fact that he's Cenk's nephew, his words and actions during the debate made his Instagram relevant and fair game in my opinion. I did a mashup of him repeatedly saying popularity was what granted you the right to speak on campus. He did it over and over again, and the crazy thing is that even though the mashup is well over a minute long, and that's with me quickening up the speed to avoid a copyright claim, it only comes from the first half of the debate because I got sick of making it. He said it so many times. People who have seen my other videos know that I go after the issue and I don't necessarily go after the person. But the video was about his poor debate performance. But the debate performance wasn't bad because he had bad ideas. He barely presented any coherent ideas. It was full of contradictions and just him generally acting like a jerk-off. Also, come on, look at this photo. I'm supposed to ignore that inferior t-shirt game? Look at this shirt, man. It's fucking awesome. I apologize for that. In fact, one of the things I commended Charlie Kirk for was not getting angry and not falling for his bait. He repeatedly refuted all of Cenk's nephew's points in a calm and concise manner. Of course, Turnpoint USA followed me and then unfollowed me off of Twitter, so as far as I'm concerned, they're basically dead to me as well, but he did do a good job in the debate. And the last thing people got mad at me for pointing out was the Young Turks' relationship to Al Jazeera, aka the state of Qatar. Now, I thought this was really obvious in the video. Cenk's nephew called out Charlie Kirk due to the fact that some of the donors to Turning Point USA were rich. The way I feel about logical fallacies is that they're a double-edged sword. As you impale your opponent, you end up stabbing yourself. So if Charlie Kirk's organization is not credible because it has some shady funders, then the Young Turks isn't credible because they have some shady funders. I don't really believe in this, and this isn't my go-to tactic, but again, if you bring it up, you better expect it back. So yeah, those were the 3 major criticisms of that video. I just wanted to not pretend like I didn't hear them. Now let's move on to the hit piece. So one of the things that can tip you off to whether or not a news source is trustworthy or not is how they cover events that turn out against their narrative. What I'm going to tell you most certainly does apply to TYT, but it doesn't only apply to TYT. There are quite a few news organizations that actually deploy these kind of tactics. Typically what happens is when the story goes against their narrative or their side, they'll do a counter story in the guise of reporting the news. However, the purpose of doing the story is not to inform you of anything, it's to counter the previous day's news narrative. Now, one of the great things about doing this as it pertains to TYT is they actually openly admitted that this is what they do. For example, after Donald Trump won the presidency, there were a number of violent incidents throughout the country. One of these incidents was unfortunately labeled the Black Lives Matter kidnapping. And the reason I say it's unfortunately labeled that is because any link between the kidnappers and BLM is superficial at best. What happened was that 4 young black people kidnapped a mentally disabled white person. They tortured him for a number of days and they streamed it live on Facebook. During the stream, they were recorded shouting "fuck white people" and "fuck Donald Trump" as they were brutalizing this young man. Now, to my knowledge, up to this point in time, these 4 individuals have not been tangentially linked to BLM in any way, shape, or form. So the fact that people call this the BLM kidnapping is not true. The only link between the two is like a general fuck white people attitude, but that's really superficial. So the way the media typically covers stories that counter their narrative is to not cover them. However, every now and again a story breaks through. It's just so big that if you don't cover it, it's more of a statement than you actually covering it. And the BLM kidnapping was one of these stories. So what happens when you're forced into a corner and you're a hack news organization? Well, you do the story that negatively impacts your narrative, and then the next day you dig something up that can counter that and restore your narrative. And that's exactly what TYT did the day after the BLM kidnapping story broke. And don't take my word for it, you can hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
There's an obvious reason why we're doing this story. I think it's pretty transparent. Something hideous happened yesterday in Chicago where 4 black adults, young adults, essentially kidnapped and tortured a mentally disabled white guy. And justice was swift. Sodomized someone, he tortured someone, he exploited someone who is mentally disabled, and no one cares. No one cares. We're not reporting this to make a political point, although there is a political point to take away. We're doing this because there is obviously a very clear double standard in our justice system, and not just that, a clear double standard in public opinion. And for anyone who's not as outraged by this story, there's something wrong with you. Because regardless of what the victim's skin color is, no one in this country should be treated like this. No one anywhere should be treated like this.
Now, the entirety of the left-wing media jumped aboard this bandwagon after the BLM kidnapping went viral. And in their own words, they covered the story specifically to counter a previous story. And counter it they did, because a month later, when they did a follow-up on this video, this is how it started out.
An Idaho judge has ruled that an attack on a black, developmentally delayed high school student by a white football player was not rape or racist in any way.
You see how she described that? White people attacking a minority. And that's how the media works. It's not just the left-wing media and it's not just the Young Turks. But there it is in plain English. When confronted with something that counters your narrative, you turn it on its head and make it your own. Just for reference, this is how many videos they did about Charlottesville post-Charlottesville. No competing narratives there, just Charlottesville. So what does this have to do with the Cenk Uygur Ben Shapiro debate? Well, we're going to discuss this video.
I am told by conservatives that college campuses are a place where you just cannot speak freely at all.
You see, Adam Carolla went to speak before Congress to talk about the real issue of left-wing violence against conservatives on college campuses, specifically conservative speakers.
Those free speech advocates, I know that the very next thing you're going to do is support Colin Kaepernick and his right to free speech. And now you got all these teams in the NFL that won't sign Colin Kaepernick. Is he among the top 90 quarterbacks in the country? Of course! Any football fan knows that. It's a different thing if we should start, but among the top 90 quarterbacks, but oh, he dared to say something we don't like. He said something about Black Lives Matter. Make sure that he doesn't get his speech. Look, I'm just waiting for you to organize those right-wing protests in favor of Kaepernick.
Oh my God, yo. Enough with the Colin Kaepernick shit. This is like every left-winger's go-to. The NFL is a private organization. Each individual NFL team is a sub-organization within that private company. I think that if you're a team and you think Colin Kaepernick can make you better and you're not signing him because he knelt, you're fucking stupid. However, with that said, that is not anywhere near the same thing as a public university banning a speaker based on the content of their speech. One is a clear First Amendment violation, the other is a private organization. Now remember, the focus of the story is on Adam Carolla's testimony. Let's hear what he has to say.
Have Carolla explain to us how college kids are snowflakes. Go ahead.
We're talking a lot about the kids, and I think they're just that, kids. We are the adults, and I don't think we are doing the children. I mean, these are 18 and 19-year-old kids that are at these college campuses. They grew up dipped in Purell, playing soccer games where they never kept score and watching Wah Wah Wubsy. And we're asking them to be mature. We need the adults to start being the adults. Studies have shown that if you take people and you put them in a zero gravity environment, like astronauts, they lose muscle mass, they lose bone density. We're taking these kids in the name of protection, we're putting them in a zero gravity environment, and they're losing muscle mass and bone density. They need to live in a world that has gravity. When you need to expose your children to germs and dirt in the environment to build up their immune system. Our plan is put them in a bubble, keep them away from everything, and somehow they'll come out stronger when they emerge from the bubble. Well, that's not happening. Children are the future, but we are the present, and we're the adults, and we need to act like it.
See, if you're an adult, you say, well, I don't want to marry gay couples and I don't want to bake them cakes, because my religion tells me I don't have to. Actually, our Constitution demands it and our laws demand it. Well, I've lost muscle mass, so I'm not going to be an adult. I'm not going to listen to the rules. You know why? Because I'm a Christian and I was dipped in Purell. And I was told that the Christians rule this country. No, we don't rule it with an iron fist anymore. Somebody give me Purell.
This is a classic example of whataboutism. It's really the tu quote quo fallacy in practice. Basically, his argument is that because some conservative bakers don't want to bake cakes for a gay wedding, they don't want to use their private business to support a gay wedding in any way, shape, or form, then it's okay for a publicly funded university to allow violence to happen at conservative events. You see, when you phrase it like that on what he's actually saying, it actually sounds quite ridiculous. And for the record, if you don't want to bake a cake or be a photographer at a gay wedding because you don't believe in gay marriage, like you don't want their money, I think you're dumb, but that's not the same thing as a public university censoring a viewpoint that they don't like. Because one is the state censoring, and the other one is a private company not wanting to do a specialty service for a certain group of people. I may not like both of them, but one of them is clearly a violation of the First Amendment. And it's not the gay cakes one. Also, we should point out the irony in Cenk being so sensitive about people pointing out how sensitive the left wing is. Everything has to be a counterattack against the right, and he has to obfuscate the point because he has no argument. Because his only other argument is to deny the facts, and when people are trying to burn down buildings that conservative speakers are in, it's kind of hard to deny.
Remember, this is not really about free speech. It partly is, but it's also about paid speech, because all these guys get paid to go to college campuses. Now, different organizations sponsor them. Sometimes it's the college itself. And sometimes in the case of Shapiro, for example, when he's going to Berkeley, that's a huge story in the news. You know that he's getting paid $20,000 for that. And I don't begrudge him that at all. And I'm gonna ask you guys a poll question in a second, and I would actually vote yes. Even though it's the college's money, if it was the college's money, I would still vote yes.
And this is where the sleight of hand comes in. It's not about freedom of speech, it's about paid speech. Ben Shapiro, did you know he's getting paid $20,000 for this speech? Did you know that Ben Shapiro does paid speeches? That's ridiculous. that money almost always comes from the college, except that it doesn't. In fact, if you do any research, you realize that this whole entire line of argument is horseshit. The part of the money that does come from the college, or possibly comes from the college, comes from the student activity fee. When you form a group on campus, and it is a recognized group on campus, you get a portion of the student activity fee because the student activity fee is for student activities. Every group gets the money. In my university, which is a little smaller than Berkeley, but since it was a public university, it's kind of comparable, this amount averaged around $800. $800 barely makes a dent in the $20,000 speaking fee. Also, groups on my college campus were all given the chance to do events to promote their group and raise money for their group. Typically, the groups sponsoring this are the Young Americans for Freedom and the College Republicans, and basically inviting a speaker is their big event. They raise the money for it. Unless the university invites you to speak, you don't get paid by the university. So almost never do these conservative speakers get their fee covered by the university. So it's just not true that that's a common occurrence. In fact, Cenk Uygur's nephew debated Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA is an organization that sponsors these speakers to go to campus and speak in front of these groups. If they were getting paid by the university, there would be no reason for Turning Point USA to exist. Obviously, it does cost a lot of money for these guys to speak. They are in demand and they are popular, despite what Cenk says. So somebody has to cover that, and Turning Point USA is a non-profit that covers that for student groups. In fact, the only time where a speaker like this is covered by the university is if they are invited by the university. And since the colleges are almost overwhelmingly liberal, your money subsidizes left-wing speech on campus, not right-wing speech. What I find really obnoxious about this is that Cenk keeps saying, oh, well, I'm in favor of bringing the conservatives on, even if the money comes out of the taxpayer's wallet or the other student's wallet.
Now, at the end of the day, I think freedom of speech is so important that I'm going to say yes, they should be allowed to speak. And if the university overall, through the student funds, pays for it, that's still okay, even if you don't agree with it. Look, the Tibetan community might be a minority community, but it would be amazing if they brought the Dalai Lama or someone else. Just because they're a minority on the college campus doesn't mean we shouldn't pay to have their speakers in. So, but I want you to know the full context.
Even if conservatives are hypocritical in the fact that they want it, well, they're not. It doesn't come from there. Only the tiny portion that's given to every recognized student group on campus could possibly go there. So what these college Republicans and the Young Americans for Freedom are really asking for is to be treated like everybody else. They don't go around and interrupt the annual events that other groups have. You almost never hear the college Democrats invited a speaker and all these conservatives went violent and shut it down. The question is, should these groups be able to have their events just like every other group on campus, as long as they are a recognized student group on campus? They are recognized student groups. They follow the rules to become recognized student groups. They got their tiny portion of the student activity fee. All they want to do is be treated like other student groups, fairly. That's it.
Berkeley is providing a free venue, which also costs money, security, which also costs money, but that's okay. That's part of when the Klan marches in town, we provide security for that too, and that's part of freedom of speech. But it does have a cost. And I bring that up because I remember when Republicans would say, why is the government funding art that offends us?
Again, while venues on college are normally sold, every student group that's recognized on campus has the option to pick one venue. That's just typically how it works. So we're not talking about something unusual, we're talking about them being treated like any other group. Also, I want to touch on that part that he mentioned about security. Why would one need security for an event like this? Could it possibly be that the left wing is so violently opposed to contrary ideas that you need the extra security to fight off the violent thugs that show up to these events? So basically what Cenk is hinting at is that it costs a lot of money for them to speak because people react with violence, so that's not really fair to the university. So basically Cenk is declaring victory in the name of violence. Because the left wing is so violent that you have to get extra security, therefore this speech costs too much and it shouldn't happen. I mean, he keeps saying that he's in favor of it, but he's bringing up shit like this.
But this is also about their right to get paid. So that brings up an interesting question that I wanted to ask you guys about. So that's our poll of the day. So tytnetwork.com/free speech. Should colleges pay for conservative speakers?
And you want to know what the funny thing is about this, of course? Berkeley actually forced the Young Americans for Freedom to pay for the extra security for Ben Shapiro. So not only is Cenk wrong on the facts, it's completely the opposite of what he's saying. He presented this question as the state having to pay extra money for conservatives, when in reality, the conservatives have to pay the state to have their free speech. Otherwise, Berkeley, the state school, wouldn't protect them. You see, this is why this is a hit piece and not actually a news story. We start off with Adam Carolla testifies before Congress, but by the end of the story, it's not about free speech on college campus. It's people like Ben Shapiro and other conservatives taking taxpayer money and putting it into their pockets.
But this is also about their right to get paid.
Even though the facts don't line up with that narrative. And then when he puts the poll up, he's like, I think we should still pay the conservatives to come on and speak because I'm really open. I mean, I'm completely misrepresenting the situation, but I'm open to it. I would pay them. I would give them the taxpayer money that they're totally not asking for or not getting in 99% of these scenarios. But are you against that? Are you against them taking your money and putting it into their pockets? Even though that's not what they're doing, but are you against that? Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. I don't really enjoy making videos about the Young Turks, if I'm being perfectly honest. However, I really hope this video not only helps you understand what's going on college campuses, but understand how the media manipulates the news. I'm pretty sure we're all capable of recognizing an overt hit piece when we see it. However, I think it's the sneaky ones like this that actually have a bigger impact. Once again, thank you guys for 1 year on this channel. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like, join the conversation by leaving a comment below, subscribe for more content, support me on Patreon and PayPal.